What stupid rule at your work/school backfired beautifully? Zero tolerance ended shortly after a bully got thrown through a window because, if I'm getting suspended for defending myself, I'm gonna make it worth my while. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting when you think about it. If you give the same punishment for all crimes, then rather than rationalizing which things are worth taking the risk for, it's more just, which crime should I pick? Because I'm just gonna get the same punishment either way. Back in 2014, our HR made a rule people couldn't go to other buildings. We had 3 buildings within a block of each other. All 3 had shipping areas, and the warehouse employees had to go to each building to work. We were told to stay at one building. I mentioned, we ship out of all 3, who's going to do the work? The genius said, oh, it'll be taken care of. The next day, $500,000 of shipment didn't go out. The following day, we have a meeting. I said, why didn't you ship this? 2 days ago, we were told to stay in our building, and someone would take care of it. The rule was quickly changed. I've mentioned this before, but whenever any sort of centralized power unit thinks that they can just control everything beneath them, they usually find out that they are not smart enough to control everything. Required every employee to use electronic time clocks to punch in and out for work, including lunch. Punching in late or leaving early would cause your pay to be docked, and getting a discipline letter. Multiple people wanted to sabotage the clocks, cutting the cords, but wiser heads prevailed. Everyone arrived several minutes early and left late, every single day, to avoid getting into trouble. Unfortunately, this created unimpeachable evidence of hours worked. The employer had to pay out thousands of dollars in overtime the first month. The clocks disappeared exactly 5 weeks after they were installed with no notification. So I personally always hated hourly pay. I mean, I know a lot of people just like to feel secure, like, oh, as long as I just spend my 8 hours here, then I'll be set, I'll make all my money. But for me, I'm just like, alright, I did all my work in 5 hours. You're seriously gonna make me sit here for 3 hours doing absolutely nothing? You can't just pay me for the work I did? So in a lot of ways, hourly pay just incentivizes people to work slower. Every shift, there's a quota we need to fulfill. And then, even if you do fulfill it, you have to keep working until your 8 hours are up. Cue everyone speeding for 4 hours, having a 3-hour lunch/coffee break, then slowly moving their butt for an hour. No rule about us taking necessary breaks if we're still capable of reaching the quota. Now we're allowed to stop once we're done. You know, when I'm reading these stories in the video, I'm reading them for the first time. I did not know I was making that comment before reading that story, but I guess this just proves my point. I worked at Starbucks for like 5+ years before and during undergrad, and at one point our district manager thought it was a good idea to implement a just say yes policy, where we literally weren't allowed to tell customers no. Lasted for about 3 months, and in the 3 months our unaccounted product and waste went up over 300%, because when the POS didn't have a way to punch in a customer request, we had to just do it anyways. We also got complaints from stores in surrounding districts because they had angry customers who were requesting things that were against local food service code, and told them that we did it for them at our store. I knew exactly how that policy was going to play out, and I just laughed every time management was freaking out about the problems it was causing. Pretty much the only businesses that can get away with that kind of model are the ones that are catering to the super wealthy, because they're really the only ones who can afford to pay for the insanely ridiculous requests they make. When COVID started, our boss demanded that our entire team sit in on group Zoom calls, even if the topics on the agenda didn't have anything to do with their roles. She felt it would build team unity. Productivity dropped, negative Google reviews came in, staff became more stressed. When she demanded answers on the next Zoom call, one of my coworkers bluntly said, "Well, I would reply to this woman's voicemail, but I'm stuck on this Zoom call." You gotta love this generation of everyone wanting to make everything work, working from home. To be honest, I always just say no to Zoom calls. I'm like, we can talk over chat or we can meet in person. The bottom floor of my secondary school was a square that had a corridor all the way around. After some incident where a kid got knocked over, they implemented a one-way system. Unfortunately, they were very strict on enforcing it. If you accidentally walked past your class, you couldn't just turn around. They seemed very proud of their new rule, until everyone started showing up late for their class because they had to do extra laps of the bottom floor. Oh man, that sounds like fun. It's like, oh no, I dropped my pencil and it rolled behind me. Now I gotta run all the way around the school to go pick it back up. I'm the one who lives closest to work, so if the building alarm goes off overnight, I'm the first on the list to get the call from the alarm company. It used to be that if we had a good reason to believe the alarm was not an actual break-in, we could tell them not to summon the police and ignore the alarm. I can access the building cameras from home. The most common alarm was cleaning crew, who were always messing up the disarming. Then a sister site ignored an alarm that turned out to be an actual break-in, and the facilities director decided that no matter what, if there was an alarm, we should have the alarm company summon the police, then go to the building, get the police all clear, and reset the alarm. This was a pain in the butt, but rare enough, and I lived literally 2 minutes away. Then we contracted for the alarm company to come in and replace all of our panels and sensors. It was a nightmare process that ultimately ended up taking months. and the whole time there were phantom alarms, sometimes multiple times a night. Each time I had to go in the middle of the night, I'd prepare the required report, send it to the facilities director, and request to go back to the old process. Each time he said no. We couldn't afford to miss a potential real break-in. After about 3 weeks of this nonsense, I was due for some time off. I was going out of town, and the protocol for that was for me to ignore calls from the alarm company, so they moved to the next person on the list, which happened to be the facilities director. In the 5 days I was off, I must have ignored at least 4 overnight calls that all would have gone to him next. Then, suddenly, nothing. When I got back, I was informed that for the duration of the alarm update, we just weren't going to arm the building at all. So much for can't afford to risk a break-in. You know, as somebody who used to watch security cameras all night, this story is actually more funny because, all of these cameras are motion sensitive. I mean, most of the ones we watched were, outside of a building, so even if the wind blew, it would show an alarm that, the tree was moving. So it was totally normal to get hundreds of alarms every single night and have nothing actually come of any of them. So I can't imagine actually sending the police out every time there's just some dumb little alarm. A long while back, but my school banned the color pink because a bunch of students were wearing it in October, and they thought it was a gang thing. It was for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The rule didn't go well for them. Yeah, I have noticed in the past, sometimes you will just see a big breast cancer gang just walking around. I'm usually not that scared to be around them, but I mean, you can never be too careful when you're a principal of a school. My spouse's workplace realized they didn't have a policy about sending sexual images or jokes as part of their email acceptable use policy, so they added it. Except they made it a firing offense to send or receive sexual content. I think the intent was to stop people from subscribing to such content. They also said that your access would be immediately revoked until a determination was made. So someone got fired for something else and decided to send their whole management chain a graphically sexual image, then report it using an anonymous tip line. IT got the report, concluded they did indeed receive sexual content, and did as required. Suspended all the involved email accounts, including the SVPs. The policy has since been reworded. Oh man, who actually makes a rule like that and doesn't see anything wrong with it? They're basically just saying, okay, if you want to get one of your coworkers fired, or maybe your boss, here's a really easy way to do that. A place I used to work had a rule that executive level staff needed to be contacted when on leave, so they had a section on the leave form for the address of where you'd be staying and a contact number. Some knuckle shuffler in HR decided it applied to all staff, and the shenanigans began. People would put down the address and phone number of sex shops, sports grounds, medical clinics. I gave the latitude and longitude of a place I was going camping, and the UHF channel my radio would be tuned to. Hey, well, I'm sure that if they need anything, they will come and find you. A late 80s high school rule was no shorts. A classmate came for an exam with basketball shorts on that were below her knees. Teacher made her go home to change. She came back in a micro miniskirt and wrote her exam. Well, as long as they weren't shorts. So the nice thing about being on camera like this is I'm actually not wearing any pants. Couldn't buy drinks at lunch with cash money. Had to buy some voucher. They were just cheaply made laminated pieces of paper. This was 2001. I was 13 and bored. Scanned the vouchers and printed them out on a paper that kinda matched the color of the vouchers, and laminated them myself. They were horribly made, and not even the right color on the backside, also crudely cut out. I made about 100 of them, and passed them out after I tried paying with them for myself, and encountered no problems. Made some new friends and upped production. Took them about 3 weeks to find out, but by then the fake ones had intermingled with the real ones, and had already been resold to students via the student office. About half of the vouchers sold were fakes. The drinks were cash only from then on. They had no choice but to accept the fake ones for a little while longer though, as they had sold and charged for some of them. Yeah, stuff like that's probably really easy to fake, because the person who's accepting the vouchers is probably like, huh, this one looks a little different, oh well. It's not like they're trying to spot counterfeited money. They could always just assume like, oh, I guess they printed them different this time. To make moving between classes more efficient, they had designated up and down stairways, but they didn't take into account that the stairs were located at the ends of the very long corridors, which meant it was impossible to get to your next class on time. Because of this, no one bothered to try to get to class on time and just blamed the stairway rule. Man, what is up with these school administrations that think that people can't walk past each other in a hallway? It's like they have two people run into each other one time and now it's suddenly, oh no, we can't have people walking in opposite directions, it's too dangerous. Not really a rule, but a change in policy. I used to work for a major beer distributor as a delivery driver. They decided to start using less glue in the packaging to save money. We're talking a few cents per package. As a result, breakage during distribution increased drastically, causing them to eat a lot more damaged products. It caused such a large loss in profit that they quickly changed course. Well, I mean, that's just kind of a standard mistake a lot of businesses do. When you try to cheap out a little bit too much, you end up paying for it. I went to a strict Catholic school with uniforms. The kids in 4th through 8th grade had to wear belts until we got a new principal who made it mandatory for all the kids in the school to wear belts. Many bathroom accidents from kindergartners, 1st and 2nd graders later, and complaints for parents, of course. The principal rescinded her addition to the dress code. More recently, this principal was fired for embezzling money from the school. Wait, so is this story that when little kids have to wear belts, they can't get their pants down to go to the bathroom? I mean, that part is actually weirder to me than the story. You can't speak a foreign language at work unless you're a certified translator in that language. We had a guy in customer service position that spoke Spanish as a second language. Yeah, his regular Spanish-speaking customers were confused as to why he could no longer speak to them in Spanish, because they knew he was fluent. Eventually he explains to them, in English, that they made it against the rules for him to speak Spanish. They weren't happy about that. Yeah, I've seen rules like this before too, where it's just like, oh, we can't have them speaking another language because what if they're saying bad stuff, or what if they're plotting something? But, like, they could just do that in private too, so you're not really stopping anything. No more swipe cards to get in the building. From now on, it's going to be fingerprint sensors. That was 2 weeks before COVID-19 happened. Hey, always just gotta have the nicest technology. Even if it's less efficient than other technologies, you want to feel like an official company. How much you want to bet the finger sensors probably suck at working anyway? Back in the early 2000s, my high school implemented a policy that you had to wear your ID tag at all times. If you didn't have it on, you were sent home. So many students lost their ID tags to go grab food or skip a class. We were the only graduating class to wear them all 4 years. The policy ended soon after. See, being sent home from school is such a funny concept, because the faculty sees this as a punishment to the students, but the students often see it as like a plus. So a lot of times students are just like, you're punishing me? That's fine, I'll punish myself. Back in 2011, a company I worked for had the bright idea to block all social networks because, you know, employees should work instead of slacking off on Facebook. I could write volumes of books on toxic culture in that place, but the owner/president who lived in a different country and visited about once every few months was universally feared by everyone, and a few days before his arrival, the whole building went into panic mode. So a few weeks after the social network ban, His Royal Highness shows up, and 5 minutes later, half of the IT department is scrambling to his office. Apparently there's an issue with the Wi-Fi, or at least that's what he figured since he couldn't log on to Facebook. It was fixed in seconds. A few years and 3 promotions later, I make a joke about it with him. Instead of a laugh, I get a confused look. Turns out he still thinks it was some internet problem, since whoever decided to ban social networks didn't have the balls to tell him about it after the incident. This is kind of a weird story, because apparently the guy that's on top that everyone is so afraid of is less strict than the people below him. So, like, wouldn't it just make more sense to be like, oh yeah, we banned Facebook because people waste too much time on it? I was working as a medical assistant at a private practice medical clinic. Our clinic manager wouldn't allow the new receptionist to drive to the bank to deposit cash. Made her walk carrying the money bag so that she couldn't drive away with the money. Bizarre, I know. That went on for a few weeks. Then the receptionist was mugged and over $1,000 in cash was stolen. She was allowed to drive after that. I mean, the whole moral of this story is like, okay, do you trust your receptionist more, or do you trust the people on the streets not to mug her more? You know there's a reason that most money transporters drive an armored truck. Not a stupid rule, but I think this should apply. I'm in aviation maintenance and wanted to leave the current company that I worked for 12 years with. During my interview with the new company, I was asked why I was thinking of leaving my current job, being that it was a good and reputable company. I said new management is all about efficiency, and not the one thing aviation maintenance is all about, safety. The interviewer liked my interview and assured their company doesn't cut any corners in safety versus cost. I get the job. Fast forward 6 months or so, I'm the new guy, so I get the short end and have to work Christmas Eve. Should be a short day. Boss's plane is coming in from Cabo to drop off chartered passengers, fill up on fuel, and take him and the family to their vacation home in Aspen. The plane arrives, and as I'm doing my post-flight walk-around, I see a big problem that forces me to ground the plane. The boss is clearly not happy, attempts to force me to make an unapproved repair. I deny to do so, and I'm sent home. Sweet. I didn't quit. It's documented, and I get to go home earlier than planned on a holiday. Someone else gets called in to do the Mickey Mouse of a repair. Everyone's happy, plane taxis out with the owner and family. Full on fuel and tries to take off. Oops, crappy repair failed. Huge component breaks off and goes into the inlet of the jet engine. Grenades that engine. The plane breaks, overheats, trying to stop the heavy plane with just one engine. Some fuselage is damaged from the engine that gave out, and the plane finally comes to a stop. FAA comes in. Sweet, who made this repair? Who accepted to take this flight? What company operates this way? So the dummy tech that tried to make the repair gets his license revoked. The boss owns the charter company, so he's fined a huge amount and is put on probation with continuous FAA audits, and, best of all, the insurance rejected his claim to the engine because it was negligence. This cost him millions, and they couldn't fire me. I got to tell the story over and over and over with a big smile on my face. You know, halfway through this story, I'm like, oh, is the guy gonna take off and then crash and kill everyone in the plane? I mean, it would kind of change the mood of the story a little bit, don't you think? My mother was an elementary school teacher. For years, the teacher's "be quiet" signal was holding up one hand and a peace sign. Well, the principal decided that this didn't have enough meaning, and invented her own. At a staff meeting, she explained that her new sign stood for ears listening, eyes looking, lips locked, and then made an L with her index finger and thumb and held it in front of her forehead. This principal didn't take criticism well, so none of the staff members were willing to tell her that she was making the loser sign. And so the new sign was taught to the children. Most of them made fun of it. Some of the more sensitive ones got upset by it. Overall, it was a disaster, and within a few weeks they went back to the peace sign. Well, the years start coming and they don't stop coming. At my old school, you could get suspended for the most minor infractions. This included smoking. However, if you were to witness to other people smoking, then you would get suspended along with them. So this ended up with everyone constantly working together to hide the smokers at all cost. Otherwise, just about everyone would be suspended. Man, what the heck is going on in these schools? So anyone who commits the crime, but also anyone who witnesses the crime also gets equally punished. So that means that you would get suspended for reporting somebody else smoking too. So, I mean, I've seen some pretty bizarre logic in these rules, but that's probably the weirdest of all. In Las Vegas, the fire departments had a policy that if someone called out and you covered their shift, you get paid overtime. Eventually, every firefighter at every department was trading shifts so that they were always making overtime. Went on unnoticed for over a year. It was a huge scandal, and the ones in charge who let it go on effectively cost the city millions, had the book thrown at them hard. Well, that's all of the backfiring rule stories we have tonight. You know, I think there's a lot of power-hungry control freaks that could really learn a lot from these stories, because it's so common for people in charge, where people will make a rule with an intention in mind, but it will be completely short-sighted and will have completely drastic side effects. You can't control human behavior, and the more you try to manipulate and control people, the more they're going to push back. I mean, there's a very major story just like this going on in the news right now, where there's so many places that say, if you don't get the vaccine, you're getting fired. And so there's millions of people out there that are just like, okay, I guess you're going to lose a lot of employees then. But that's all for now. I'll talk to you next time.